Did you know Africa holds 2.5 trillion in investable wealth? But that number only scratches the surface of a complex story. Today, we're diving into the world of African wealth books and documentaries, separating the hype from the history, and exploring what wealth really means on the continent. We're not just talking about money, we're talking about systems, cultures, and legacies. One popular modern title immediately comes to mind: Mothupi Kgopa's African Wealth Paradigm Shift. This book isn't a historical text, but more of a self-help guide focused on mindset and strategies for wealth creation. Kgopa urges Africans to rethink consumption and invest in assets like property, stocks, franchises, manufacturing, and farming. He even advocates for a reimagining of the Stokvel, a type of rotating savings and credit association, as an investment tool, rather than just a savings mechanism. That brings us to the hard numbers. The 2024 Africa Wealth Report, compiled by Henley and Partners and New World Wealth, paints a specific picture. That 2.5 trillion in investable wealth is held by 135,200 high-net-worth individuals, each possessing at least 1 million. There are 342 centimillionaires and $21 billionaires. The report projects a 65% increase in millionaires over the next decade. But here's the critical detail: wealth is heavily concentrated. South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and Morocco, the Big Five, account for over half of Africa's millionaires and a staggering 90% of its billionaires. The report also highlights some unsettling trends. The South African rand has seen significant depreciation against the US dollar. And several countries, including Nigeria, Egypt, Angola, and Zambia, have experienced even more dramatic currency devaluations. Perhaps most concerning is the emigration of high-net-worth individuals. About 18,700 have left Africa in the last decade. While 54 African-born billionaires exist globally, only 21 still reside on the continent. These figures reveal a crucial point: African wealth isn't a monolithic entity. It's unevenly distributed, vulnerable to economic instability, and impacted by global migration patterns. But what about wealth before modern finance? Joseph C. Stevens' Poverty and Wealth in East Africa, a conceptual history, challenges the notion that Africans lacked sophisticated economic concepts before colonialism. Employing comparative historical linguistics, archaeology, climate science, oral traditions, and ethnography, Stevens reconstructs pre-colonial understandings of poverty and abundance. This is important because it dismantles the assumption that African economic thought began with European contact. Another key text, discussed in an Africa Journal review, is The Wealth and Poverty of African States: Economic Growth, Living Standards, and Quality of Governance. The author argues that Africa's economic struggles in the 1980s and 1990s were an anomaly, not a reflection of an inherent or timeless decline. It suggests that there was a period of progress prior to that, starting in the 1890s. And while it focuses on the American context, Mircea Baradaran's The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap offers valuable insights into how systemic factors shape wealth disparities. In 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, Black Americans owned less than 1% of total U.S. wealth. Baradaran argues that housing segregation, racist policies, and discriminatory lending practices have historically blocked Black wealth accumulation. These insights remind us that wealth is not solely the result of individual effort, it's profoundly shaped by systems. It's important to remember wealth in pre-colonial Africa wasn't always about cash. It was often tied to livestock, land use rights, trade goods, tribute systems, and human labor networks. Access to resources like salt, iron, ivory, and gold, as well as participation in long-distance trade, were also crucial indicators of wealth. In many cases, wealth was more social and productive than purely financial. As Stevens' research suggests, Africans had their own sophisticated economic vocabularies and status systems long before European interference. These systems understood wealth in relation to community, ecology, labor, and livestock. The Stokvel, championed by Kgopa, is not a new invention but a modern continuation of older traditions of rotating savings, burial societies, mutual aid, and cooperative finance. Where formal banking was historically inaccessible, these informal systems became the first financial infrastructure for many households. A crucial, and often overlooked, aspect of African wealth is how it has been historically extracted. Raw materials have been exported, colonial states have seized resources, wealth has been moved into overseas accounts, and currency devaluation has eroded economic stability. So, when we talk about African poverty, we must also ask, who controls the surplus? The concentration of wealth in the Big Five isn't simply due to entrepreneurial success. These regions also have larger financial sectors, bigger urban populations, stronger real estate markets, deeper capital markets, and closer ties to global trade. Books about African wealth are important because they shape our understanding of poverty, entrepreneurship, savings, consumption, inheritance, and even state failure. They can influence policy decisions and contribute to a sense of collective identity. The history of wealth in Africa is inextricably linked to trans-Saharan trade, Indian Ocean commerce, gold and salt economies, the transatlantic slave trade, colonial concession systems, and post-colonial state control over resources. This means that wealth creation has never been isolated from global forces. By highlighting pre-colonial economic thought and local institutions, Stevens and other scholars restore African agency and challenge outdated colonial assumptions about economic complexity. While the 2024 Africa Wealth Report points to significant growth potential, it also reveals fragility. Currency depreciation, capital flight, and the emigration of wealthy individuals are major concerns. The story of African wealth is not just about growth, it's about retention. Across the continent, informal savings systems like Stokvels remain crucial, especially where credit is expensive, banks are inaccessible, and trust networks are strong. This is precisely why wealth books resonate with so many Africans. They speak to the reality of financial exclusion and offer alternative pathways to economic empowerment. The future of African wealth will likely be urban and asset-based, driven by sectors like real estate, logistics, fintech, telecoms, consumer brands, agribusiness, and regional manufacturing. As we conclude, it's clear that understanding African wealth requires moving beyond simplistic narratives. It demands acknowledging historical complexities, recognizing the importance of culture and community, and addressing the systemic forces that shape economic outcomes. The story of African wealth is still being written, and its future depends on a deeper, more nuanced understanding of its past and present.